When the parents of an 18-year-old have to bury him or put him to rest, that's not a healthy situation.
That was really had a big impact on you as godfather. I mean, emotionally, I remember.
Families first. Always remember families first. I remember when my dad went to every one of my high school football games. And when he was at the hospital, and I remember telling him, Dad, I love you I never told you this before, but thanks for going to all of my high school football games. Miami, I often tell people, Miami's not the hottest city in America. It's the hottest city in the world. Everybody wants to be here.
Yep.
I was working with this confidential informant who says, hey, I know a bunch of cops who are bad cops. I hire them. We move kilos all over Miami. So I took him down to the police station. We have this photo album where we're all wearing white robes. He opened the album and said, hey, I hired this guy. I paid him X amount I hired this guy. And then he said, hey, these guys are involved. They just killed some guys on the Miami River. That became the River Cops case.
Welcome to the second episode of Miami Unveiled, a show about the city you think you know and the people you've never truly seen. It's not the skyline, it's not the headlines, but it's the real Miami, bold, bruised, and burning with dreams. Now, Miami isn't just a place. She's a force of nature. She carves you, she scarves you, she tests you. And if you survive her, she makes you part of her story. Today, we tell the story of Rodney Barreto, a son of the city born into bones long before it became a brand. His grandfather came from Cuba to Key West and helped lay the Florida East Coast Railroad, the iron spine that pulled Miami from swamp to skyline. His father followed, steel-toed boots on the tracks, building the foundations of a city in motion. Rodney, he inherited that spirit, one of 11 kids in a crowded house filled with noise, grit, and grace. No privilege, no shortcuts. Construction work, street smarts, and a mother who never stopped believing. At 19, he became a cop just as Miami started breaking wide open. McDuffie, Mariel, cocaine, riots. He stood in the fire and he didn't blink. But Rodney's story wasn't just about survival. It was about evolution. He left the badge, stepped behind the curtain, and became the guy who could get things done quietly, powerfully, and consistently. Monty Traynor brought him in. Mayor Steve Clark trusted him. Governors called, business leaders followed. Super Bowls, FIFA, Bayfront, the Everglades. And for 2 decades, he helped lead the Florida Fish and Wildlife Commission, providing the land, the water, and the story underneath it all. Rodney's fingerprints are everywhere. No headlines, no campaign signs, just a phone that always rings when it matters. This isn't a political story, it's a Miami story. It's about a man who shaped the city, not from the stage, but from the center. And if I sound like I understand that, it's because I do, because I've walked those same streets, felt the same weight, watched this city rise and fall and rise again. This is the Miami and the Rodney Barreto you've never seen. This is Miami Unveiled, and I'm your host, Fred Menachem. And today, I'm sitting down with a man who's never needed attention because the real power in Miami has always had him on speed dial. My brother from another mother, Rodney Barreto.
Hey, Fred.
Good to see you, my man.
Good seeing you. Great to see you, man. You look great.
Thank you, man. You look good as well, man.
Thank you. Down a few pounds.
At 80 years old, I can't believe it, man. It's incredible. I'm happy to see you, man. It's been a while.
Yep, absolutely. It's been great. So good to see you again.
It's good to see you, man. We've known each other a long time,
We have. Back to our Alex Pinellas days.
Raising money, man. Running the streets.
That's it. We were young, crazy, and full of a lot of energy.
It's crazy though because back then I felt like you were old, man. And the truth is, because I was in my 20s. You weren't that. You were 14 years older than me, maybe. Yeah. We were kids, man.
It's amazing how that works. I remember the undefeated Dolphin team. I thought those guys were old, and now I know them now, and they're a little bit older than me, not much.
It's crazy, but man, listen, I'm very proud of you, man.
Yeah.
You're doing a lot in the community. I've known you a long time.
Yep.
We're going to talk a little bit about how you came up, man. No privilege, man. And
it's a lot of hard work, and one good thing, I had a dad who was very involved civically. He taught me when you're successful, you give back, and I love giving back to the community. The community's been very good to me and my family. So,
and I love that you're doing it. I will say before we get started that I was thinking the other day. One of the favorite things was when I used to look at Facebook. And I would get those messages from you because Johnny Cash, man.
Yeah.
You sent me Waylon Jennings, Johnny Cash. You stopped doing it for a while. I guess we're not on Facebook, but I would wait. Yeah. So for folks that are watching or listening, so Rodney and I, we share a love for
Johnny Cash and country music, and it's the good old things. Not everybody understands and believes in that, but it's the most popular music in America.
Who would have thought that this Jew right from Miami would be, and maybe one day we'll show them my tattoo on my back. I have a Johnny Cash tattoo.
Yeah.
But that'll be for another time. So anyhow, I'm so glad you're here. I have so much I want to talk to you about, man. So let's kind of start with your family, man. You know, you talked about your dad. I mean, look, your family is really, I mean, fits, you know, the narrative of this story because they are in Miami. You guys, look, you know, your grandfather, you know, coming to Key West, and we'll talk about that story to of course, unfortunately being killed by a train working for the Florida East Coast Railroad, and, you know, your grandmother moving here, and you guys have been a fabric of this community, you know? And, you know, I think that a lot of people think that, and part of the reason we're doing this podcast, because they think that we, like, always have been this place with high rises and, you know, and developments, but, you know, I think it all started with beaches and neon, but, you know, it wasn't discovered.
You know, Miami Beach was all retayees.
Right? Old Jews. I always say old Jews on right?
Sitting on the porch in their lawn chairs. And things have changed a lot. So, yeah, so it's you know, Miami's evolved. It's still evolving.
So what I was thinking about is, and I think this is important, so to talk a little bit for a moment, I just want to, for folks that are watching or listening, that, you know, in the late 1800s, right, Henry Flagler, so I want to give some narrative here, he had the Florida, you know, he started building the Florida East Coast Railroad, and it carved the coast. It really is what this city's about. It created this city, and, you know, the rails hit Miami 1896, I think, and, you know, that's really when the city was born. So your grandfather was one of the men, obviously, that built those tracks, and unfortunately...
No, he didn't build it. He ran the trains in Camagüey, Cuba. And in 1900, he came to Key West because he heard of Flagler building the train to Key West. So he was a railroad man in Cuba, and then ultimately moved to Key West. The train was delayed getting to Key West, but ultimately got to Key West. And my grandfather went and became one of the conductors of the train to Key West.
And it was a different, I imagine, and you didn't know him, of course, he died in 1936.
Well, my dad lost his dad when he was 10 years old.
Yep. And so you didn't get the chance to know him, but that story, it was a different, I think it was a different migration back then coming from Cuba.
Yeah, sure.
I mean, it was more Spaniard.
Well, plus Key West back in those days, the real tobacco trade was there. It wasn't Ybor City, it was Key West. And until the hurricane in the 30s wiped out pretty much the Keys, and that trade moved over to what created Ybor City.
So tell that story for me, because I think a lot of people probably don't know it. That's an interesting part of history. So about how all that happened.
The way I understood it, when the hurricane hit the Keys in the 30s, it wiped out a lot of the Keys, and then a lot of the trade left Key West and moved to Tampa. So. And so it first went to Tampa before Miami was even thought about. Yeah, Miami was the place. I mean, well, way before Miami it was Key West.
So look, your father has a lot of footprints on this city, and I think, you know, it's unfortunate. One of the reasons we're doing this show is, right, so people learn about these things. I mean, your dad was the fabric of this small town. Which,
he was a clog in the wheel. I put it that way. Yeah. You know, the railroad still had a big presence. They owned a lot of real estate. A lot of people wanted to buy or lease property from the railroad. Businesses were created because my dad would put what they call a rail spur onto someone's property. You know, Alhambra Lumber, you know, the big beer companies all had rail spurs because they delivered their product right to their site. So that helped create, you know, listen, not too far here, just north of here was Buena Vista Yard.
Right.
People know Buena Vista Yard. So Abel Holtz was trying to bring a baseball team here when Mayor Suarez, the first Suarez, the father.
Xavier, right?
When Xavier was mayor, my dad donated the land for the baseball stadium. He figured if he donate the land, they put a baseball team there in Buena Vista Yard, then the railroad would come do all the development around the stadium. And it didn't happen. But that's the way they thought.
Your dad donated land. See, that's such a great, that's a world that a lot of people don't realize. You can grow up working class, but still have land, still have things, raise a big family. You know, we'll talk later about the world's changing. And I think that.
But it wasn't, you know, it wasn't his land. It was the railroad's land. But
But
still, the railroad saw the value in it because they only would increase the value of their surrounding land.
Look, what I know about your father, and I never met your father, but I've heard, I don't think I did. He died 2010, I believe.
You met him.
I met your dad, actually.
He used to go by my else's office all the time.
I did meet him, but I didn't know him well. And, you know, from what I've heard is that, of course, your father wasn't a lobbyist, but Miami was a different town. De facto lobbyist, I say. You said the cog in the wheel. He was the guy that went to the county, got things done for the railroad, right? He knew everybody. There was a group of those guys.
the guys from, I remember it was the CEO of Bell South, the CEO of FP&L.
So you're talking about Tito Gomez?
No.
Oh, no, before. Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah,
Who was
before
it?
Tito Gomez. And then there was the guys at FP&L. There was my dad. Those guys who kind of controlled the businesses, the big businesses back in those days. Those were the big businesses here. Miami was a small town. It was all little meat and potatoes.
Even when I was growing up,
Yeah.
Miami was a small town. I mean, I used to go hang out. My dad would make me pick weeds with Paul Moss.
Yeah.
A good old, cracker, but Paul was the best, and my dad and him were like this. And it was an amazing Miami, small town.
Yep.
And I don't know, I loved growing up here as a kid. We used to smoke cigarettes behind the power plant and other things, until the cops would come and, catch us. And
yeah, that was different. I mean, I remember it was crazy back then when we were kids. The police would pull us over. If any of us were drinking, they would say, okay, how many beers you have? How many beers you have? You have one? Okay, you drive home.
Exactly. I remember I grew up by Killian. Well, you lived in Galloway Glen.
Yeah.
I grew up in that neighborhood. Now, there was nothing there at that point. It was, a few houses. The developer, it was single family developer, Felix Munoz used to take me to Club Kudamar. You don't even know what that is?
Yeah.
It was and he used to, old Cuban, I used to go. And I just remember the cops would pull us over and they would say, open your trunk. We're drinking. I'm like, oh, shit. And they just put the beer in it. Get the hell out of here.
Yeah.
It was like, I mean, it was small town.
Yep.
And it was, a lot of people don't know about it. So back to your father. Look, your dad had a big impact on you, right?
He did. He helped develop the railroad's holdings here in South Florida, and it's amazing. But he was best friends with Steve Clark, who they went to grade school right down the street, Jesuit High School. My mom, my dad are high school sweethearts. They got married, had 11 kids. But my actual grandfather, because of the closeness.
Rogelio. Was his name?
Rogelio was my grandfather.
Right.
Was Steve Clark was my actual grandfather. So that kind of helped me, when I got into politics, here it is, the guy who ran the county for 30-something years was my grandfather. But it was really when my star kind of rose a lot when Alex Pinellas, a young...
Who's that? Who's that guy, man?
Alex Pinellas, a young politician from Hialeah. Myself and a couple other guys talked him into running for Dade County government, and he won. He ran, he won, and then my star shined brighter. And one thing from there just led to another, and then I was involved with Governor Bush's campaign. I was involved with a lot of different people throughout the state of Florida, throughout the country actually, and built a big business, and then kind of brought it back down to Florida again.
We're going to get into, by the way, all of that. I have in my head, I want to get all that, but you brought up Alex Pinellas, so I have to, I can't control myself, all joking aside. That's where you and I met.
Yep.
I mean, Alex, I told him last night, I think that one of the reasons we're doing this is because people don't know, right? They don't know the history here. I mean, Alex did, I mean, we could, you know that Alex did transformational things. I told him last night, I said, Alex, I bet nobody's ever told you this. I said, I'm very proud of you. And I said, we forget, we kind of spit out our people sometimes here. And I think we've forgotten sort of who we are.
Alex was very thoughtful as a mayor, very thoughtful. He had good people around him. My current business partner, Brian May, was a former chief of staff. Brian's a bright guy. He was also former Mayor Clark's chief of staff. Remember, Mayor Clark,
that's right.
When he left the county, he ran for the city of Miami, became the mayor of the city of Miami, and the first thing he did was make Brian his chief of staff.
That's right.
And so Brian's done very well. He served a lot of people. Served former Senator Bill Nelson when he was the insurance commissioner.
And that was Fred Karlinski, Brian. There was a
Brian
whole
was his
crew.
deputy chief of staff. Yeah. So Brian's a bright guy.
I love Brian, man. Look, I mean, when I got into politics, I mean, it was Brian and Herman. Those were my guys, man.
Yeah.
And they threw a guy, a Jewish kid, didn't speak any Spanish at that point, into Hialeah with a guy named Cuco Carcass. You know that name, right?
Yeah.
I would sit on the street in Al Lorenzo, and I was just like, Jew, what did I know? And I would sit on the street with him, and whatever. And that's another day. Those are another stories, but I think that's another reason why, like you, I was so accepted here, because we were willing to go in, and one thing about you is that, in a similar fashion, you grew up in a very anglicized Miami, but then as it transitioned, you never had a problem with, working through every racial and ethnic group here, and you got along. I mean, talk about that for a minute, because I think it's really interesting.
I went to a great school. We all went to St. Michael's, because it was right near where we lived. But all my friends were Cuban-American, and they're my best friends today. I mean, they're all doctors, lawyers, and very successful business people, and it's great. We all get along. We still get together, and several of us went from St. Michael's. We went to LaSalle High School,
right?
And you know, my parents were great. They sent me there, and you know, it was a private school. They had to pay for it. So, but you know, when I look back, when you know, I raised 2 kids, and I know how expensive that is. Imagine raising 11.
Brad and Brittany, right?
Yeah, Brad and Brittany, and so I'm very thankful what my parents did for me.
So let's talk for just a moment about that, because I know a bit about you, and your mom is really an important part of your life.
Sure.
I mean, I just through Facebook all those years, I always saw her. I mean, everybody knew your mom, man.
Yeah.
Right? We saw you spent a lot of time with her. She was really important. She was quieter, but everybody, I mean, people that know she was the matriarch of this community in many ways. When you talk about,
well, she was great. She stayed out of everybody's business. Right. Number one, and even as my older siblings got married, she stayed out of their marital business, and she was very, very good. She was a very religious lady, and a smart woman, and she dedicated her life to her husband and her children, and you got to love that. And she was always great. She was a confidant to all of us. It was great. As she got older, she lived to be 101, believe it or not, but she sent out a text one time. She says, "Hey, Rodney, you're the best, but don't tell your brothers and sisters." But what she did is she did it to all of them.
Everybody,
she did it to all of them. We all laughed. So she sent out a text to each one of them and said, "Hey, you're the best, but don't tell your brothers and sisters." But that was her sense of humor. She had a great sense of humor.
But it's probably more than a sense of humor. I mean, you know,
well, she loved all of us.
She wanted to make everybody feel special, though. And so, as children, 11 kids, and I grew up before I knew how hard it was. It's hard to get enough attention.
Yeah, she would always say that we're her 11 blessings in life. So that was her line. So,
and even she counted you too.
Oh yeah,
right?
Yeah. And she always, her advice throughout her whole life, she would always tell me, "Rodney, live life like today's your last day. Tomorrow's not guaranteed." So she would always tell you that. And you know, if you look at this, listen to those words, they're so true. Nothing's guaranteed.
Yep.
You know, it's tomorrow. So she always kind of.
And we'll talk about that later. You've had some experience with that, unfortunately. Yeah, we'll get into that a bit later, but we don't know.
You never know.
I could talk about your family all day, but let's go because I have so much to talk about.
Sure.
Let's talk a bit, and I love this story, man. So we're talking about, we got a guy sitting at 7-Eleven. Who's this guy, man? Eating smoked fish dip, right? Working construction, figuring out what the heck am I doing with my life, right? I mean, I used drinking Slurpees, maybe. Did they have Slurpees back then?
Yeah, they did.
Right.
Yeah.
Sitting out there, you know, and you're sitting there, and you're like all of us in small town, you're probably a bit lost, right? Like listening to Jimmy Buffett, maybe, or no?
Yeah, whoever I was listening to. But you know, it was one of those jobs that I got out of high school. I worked construction. It was for Otis Elevator Company, and installing elevators in high rises. And you know, you'd go in about 5:30, 6 in the morning. You'd be done by 3:30 in the afternoon. And the next thing I did is I found myself as a routine. It was the same crew would leave the job site, go to 7-Eleven, eat smoked fish, right, and drink cold beers, and that was the cycle. And I said, "Wow, this is not going. I'm not going anywhere quick on this deal."
How old were you think?
I was 18
17,
years.
18, right?
Yeah,
right.
18 years old, and then I had an older brother who was he was a chief, not chief, but not then at the time.
Richard, you're talking about, right?
Richard. He was a policeman in Miami Beach, and he said, he encouraged me. He said, "Hey, why don't you just apply for the police department? You know, it's a lot of excitement, you know." And I said, "All right, well, let me try that." So I applied and got accepted. At 19 years old, I was in the police academy, and I was a city of Miami policeman. So it was fun.
Did you ever, like, I'm sure, did you ever think to yourself, right? You're sitting in that moment. I mean, I grew up in both Miamis like you too, but you're sitting at 7-Eleven, you're like, fuck, I'm going to be a cop, right? Like, whatever, my brother said, what else do I have to do, right? You ever think like that you actually were going to ever be in a place where you are today and doing the things you're doing? Did it ever cross your mind, or you just were one thing at a time?
No, it's one thing at a time. You know, I dreamed like every kid. I dreamed of different things that I wanted in life.
What did you dream?
Oh, I always wanted to have a Corvette. I dreamed of having a Corvette, and I remember back in those days they sold for like $3,800, brand new, but that was a lot of money. Yeah. Listen, I made $7.25 as a police officer an hour.
Incredible.
Yeah, right. You imagine that, putting your life on the line for $7.25.
Listen, there's a lot of of course, it's and especially them, which we're going to talk about now. I mean, so but you never got the Corvette, man. You got a lot of other things.
Yeah.
You did get the Corvette.
No. I've done well. I'm blessed.
No, I know that, but we need to get the Corvette, man.
No.
Right now, you're done with that. That George Jones, man. Right, exactly.
I've done.
So let's talk because this is the Miami story, man. So we're talking about Miami in the '80s, man. Paradox, right? Sleepy town. We like in many ways, you and I both were sheltered before that, right?
Yeah.
We didn't all this shit going on. We didn't know about it, but you have, everybody talks about it. You have the Marielitos. You have the Mariel, boat lift. You have McDuffie riots. You have cocaine wars. I mean, you have the river rat cops. Whatever river rat. Yeah, you have all of this going on. You have heads thrown out of car hoods, which we'll talk about, right? We had, cops being killed. And I always joke that, and there's the other Miami, like my Miami, just sitting behind Killian, drinking Mickey Malt beers. And the '80s, the same time when you were a cop, like, trying to learn about who we were. 16-year-old going to Pink Pussycat, sneaking away from our parents. That Miami, and it's like two Miamis. And then you also had, and to say this is the truth. You had cortaditos with cocaine bags under it, right? Like people selling. You had food trucks where it was, this was in the middle of a crazy time when Miami was lost a bit. So, why don't you talk about that for a bit? You walk in as a cop, where were we, man? Paradise Lost, right?
Well, I think I'd be remiss if I didn't plug in one part of that, which was why I was a police officer, and I did it for 5 years, 6 years, I'm sorry. And I worked for Monty Trainer's restaurant.
Right.
Monty in 1980 went from a beer joint to a full liquor license. And it was the most popular place in South Florida, especially Coconut Grove. It would, on Friday, Saturday, and Sunday nights, it'd have a line 2 blocks long to get in the place. And I was the cop at the door. And I probably didn't let half of Miami in the place, and the other half I let in. But I met everybody there and met lifelong friends who we laugh when we see each other. Man, you threw me out of Monty's. And it's just kind of funny to kind of recall those memories. But those were kind of the good old days. And anyways, long story, fast forward, I was working plain clothes in the Grove. I was pulled up in the black part of the Grove. I pulled up to a corner. Some kid took a shot at me, and they all ran off. We ended up arresting somebody because a neighbor called and said, "Hey, it's little Johnny." So, long story short, I couldn't identify him. So ultimately, the state attorney dropped charges on him. But there was a huge article in the newspaper. And Monty's, if you remember Monty's back in the day, it was the political epicenter. All the politicians, the mayor, the manager, all
before Versailles.
Yeah, before Versailles would all go to Monty's for lunch and so on and so forth. So I remember walking in like 2 days later. I walked in at lunchtime, and Monty saw me, and he says, "You know what, Rodney? Why don't you come work for me, man? My friends don't need to be shot at." And so I wow. I worked at that time. I worked for the chief of police. And I went to him and said, "Hey,
Carville, wasn't it? I
know it was. Oh God.
I didn't mean to stump you, man.
Anyway, so I went to the chief and I said, "Listen, I got this offer." He said, "Well, why don't you take the offer? It doesn't work out, I'll leave the door open for you." So I wasn't married at the time. I was single. I was 25 years old. I took a chance, and then I never looked back.
Obviously, Monty Trader, we'll get into that, was a big part of this community. We all knew him. I love Monty.
Big part of my life.
Yeah, he was an amazing person. He had his struggles with we could talk about that in a minute, but I want to go back because it's funny, when we tell stories later in life, we forget like the feelings sometimes, right? Think back for a minute. What did it feel like? You get shot at, Rodney. Like, what the hell? You're this kid, going to, you didn't grow up in that Miami. You're like, what the hell do I do? I'm working construction. And you freaking, you weren't even a beat cop for that long because, 6 months or something, I think. Yeah. And you get shot at, dude. Like, what? Like, think for a minute. Take your pause. Like what? What's going through your head, man?
Well, I think, it's the job I chose at that time. But, I'm very fortunate. I mean, I know some guys I was on the police department that didn't go home. Yeah. They were killed. And it still happens today in today's world. So I'm blessed. I count my blessings all the time. And it wasn't an easy job because you don't know what you're walking up on. I don't care how well trained you are, walking up to some car, walking into a house, walking into a business. You don't know what you're walking into. So you imagine someone on the other side being very paranoid and think that you know everything that's going on. You have no clue. And so. It's a little scary.
But let's paint the picture for a minute before we move to the next, because I think this is important as we talk about the history arc, right, man? Where I'll let you do it, but we're talking about, you're saying you don't know what you walked into, but especially then, they're hiring cops, they're hiring anybody, right? I mean, Mariel, I'll let you talk about that. Give that little arc there, because it was.
Yeah, I mean, after the 80 riots and then the Mariel boat lift, Miami had a purge. A lot of old-time police officers said, "We're done with this. I'm quitting. I don't need this aggravation. I don't need this. The world's changing." So there was a purge, and then so really Miami was lacking at that time. They were probably lacking like 500 police officers. So they went on a real fast hiring spree. And at the time too, they wanted more minorities on the police department, women, Hispanics,
right.
African American. So they really kind of hired a whole bunch of people real quick, and probably didn't vet them all the way they should have. And that proved to be right later on, because they hired a bunch of bad cops.
So tell us, real quick, tell the river. I mean, a lot of people are going to watch this. Well, and that would just hit the surface. I mean, that was one of.
It was just, I was working with this confidential informant who says, "Hey, I know a bunch of cops who are bad cops. I hire them. We move kilos all over Miami," and so on and so forth. So I took him down to the police station. We have this photo album where we're all wearing white robes. He opened the album and said, "Hey, I hired this guy. I paid him X amount we moved 20 kilos of coke here. I hired this guy." And then he said, "Hey, these guys are involved. They just killed some guys on the Miami River." That's became the River Cops case. And
they were robbing drug dealers, basically.
They were basically robbing drug dealers, keeping the money and keeping the drugs and selling the drugs, and they were bad guys.
And that was, by the way, just the tip of the surface.
Yeah.
I mean, it's funny because, I grew up at that time too, but you hear this. I lived right by Dayland, but if you think about the insanity of where we were then and now, but before we go on, because you mentioned, I want to talk a little bit about Steve Clark and maybe about Monty for a minute, but I know there was a story about a car and throwing something out of it. I mean, you should tell that story.
Which one was that?
When somebody threw something at you out of a car.
Oh, no, well, we pulled up. We pulled up on a scene where someone had decapitated a gentleman, and the guy literally threw the head at the officers, and I was there right after it happened. But you can imagine seeing just the head. Okay, so listen. There's reason why they have people who give therapy to police officers.
Right.
They do see a lot. I tell people often that a police officer in today's age sees more in one day than the average person sees in a lifetime.
Yeah.
I mean, so this whole post-traumatic syndrome stuff is real for real. That's why a lot of police officers don't live long. A lot of firemen don't live long. Imagine what they have to deal with. The first responders.
With siblings. Richard. I wish we had more time to talk about them. But one another. We will over time with but Richard. Police chief.
Miami Beach.
Miami Beach. You have a couple siblings who are firefighters, right?
Yep.
You
had 3 brothers who are firefighters.
So you know that story, and it's a tough one. But heads being thrown out of cars. I mean, that's pretty. I'm not laughing, but it's pretty insane. The Miami that people don't know they're here. They're partying at 11, right? They're going, and they don't realize what really.
Well, crime really knows no boundaries. You know what I mean?
That's true.
And there's a lot of crime with respect to domestic crime, whether there's a father abusing a child, a mother abusing a child, children abusing the grandparents. That part was something that was a real eye opener for me, because I grew up in a loving family. We prayed before dinner. We went to mass but that's the part I really wasn't prepared for. Was a father abusing either sexually or physically abusing a child, or a child abusing a grandparent who couldn't defend themselves. That was a real eye opener.
And that's look. I've been in my life. I've done a lot of things in this community, foster kids, and I've seen, unfortunately, it doesn't go away. You see, like Alex and I were talking about. Do you remember Alex's brother Pedro?
Yeah.
Look at that. He went through this mental health.
Right.
And you see these. Not to get off tangent, but I will talk about this for a minute, because you just brought something interesting. I remember I was working in foster care, right, and they live in group homes, right?
Right.
And so. Kathy Rundle, the state attorney was, trying to pass these, human trafficking laws. And this is 15 years ago. And
it wasn't in vogue then, by the way.
what's that? What?
Human trafficking. Today, in today's
Right.
world, everybody, they didn't talk about it by then.
No,
Now they talk about it. In
and
fact,
so-
2020, when I chaired the Super Bowl committee,
Yeah.
Super Bowl came to me and gave me $100,000 to run a human trafficking campaign.
Oh, that's right.
And we did it at the airport and at the hotels. We trained hotel people what to look for. And Kathy, our state attorney, was real involved. And now that's become very typical now. Any major event is a human trafficking campaign, which is great.
And that's the underbelly, I think, of this community. And when you have the success of a community like this, you also have those type of things that comes that make sense. And, at that point, like you said, it wasn't in vogue, always talking about it, but I remember you had foster kids in group homes, right? And the girls, of course, they have no opportunity, right? And, a pimp, which comes to them and of course, they're going to jump into that. And so a lot of times it was very difficult to prosecute anybody, because they wouldn't talk.
Right.
And unfortunately, this is something that I think when we see the flashing lights here and we see, all the glitz and glamour, we have to remember with that comes, crime, like you talk about.
Sure.
But, I didn't mean to go there, but it kind of just went there. And I think it's important because you've been very engaged in you understand this community. But on a less depressing note, let's, I think we talked about Monty, but let's talk about, okay, so you're at Monty, but then you take a job. Tell me that trajectory a bit, because Monty really opened that world to you.
He did. And then I went on to run a committee called the Greater Miami Host Committee, which basically hosted the Miss Universe pageant, Miss USA, Miss Teen USA. We brought the Wheel of Fortune to Miami. There was no convention bureau in Miami at the time.
Right.
So Monty actually filled that void. And he did all these things, and I executed them for him. And then I created the Big Orange event, which is still going on 30 plus years at the Intercontinental Hotel, Bayfront Park. And then Rosario Kennedy, then Commissioner Kennedy, put me on the Bayfront Park Trust. I hired the first executive director. I wrote the first budget, and I put things in place that the park is so successful today. Of some of the things we did when it first opened, we made it an enterprise zone where anybody comes to do an event there, they got to rent the chairs and the tables from us for things that we own now, and it's been paid for 30 times over, 100 times over. So just good things for the community.
But you took a job at the county, right, or the city after Monty?
No.
You never?
No. That was a not-for-profit. That was it filled a void for there was no convention bureau. I did work for a short while for Manny Medina when he bought Monty's.
Oh, you worked for Manny? Oh, yeah.
When he bought Monty's. And then probably 6 months into that, I decided I was going to go work for myself. That's when I started my lobbying firm.
So I want to go back for a minute, though, because, this podcast, of course, is about Miami as the character.
Yeah.
And I really hope that more and more younger people tune in to learn. So we don't talk often. We talk a lot of our history when we talk starts with Alex Pinellas, right? We just seem to turn to, but Steve Clark, powerful force. Your father's best friend, your godfather, basically, right?
Yeah.
He was your godfather.
Yeah.
He was, they called the Marshmallow Mayor, I think, right? But he went to work until he had cancer. This guy was really, truly committed to this community. And I think just for a moment, why don't you just talk about Steve, who he was and
Well, he was the Irish mayor who told me, he goes, listen, there's 10 phrases you need to know to survive in Miami. And I go, what others? He goes, claro que sí, como no, comanda, café, dime algo, And he would go through these 10 phrases, and he said, that way you can communicate anywhere in Miami. And he would, but he would go and he would sing Spanish. He was a good leader. However, I was nowhere on his radar screen until Alex Pinellas won. And then he needed to be friends with Alex Pinellas. And
you were on his radar screen as a kid.
I was bridging that gap for him.
Right, but you were on his radar screen as a kid.
Yeah.
Well, look, it was such a different Miami. I might get in trouble for saying this, but you look at Rodney's looking at me. But in those days you could call. Come on, Rodney, you can call Steve on the dais. They're right on the phone. You had this phone sitting right next to him. Come on, you got to tell him.
It was different.
Right.
The politics were different.
Yeah,
a lot different today than it was then. But the mayor was great. He was a big community guy. Yeah.
And I think that before we move on, I want to say that story of Miami. Think about it. You didn't grow up 11 kids having opportunity to go away to college and all that. You learn with grit, and you worked at Monty's, which really opened up the doors to a lot of people. And and in parallel, I mean, that's the Miami I grew up in. You know this already. Like campaigns, I would sleep on the floor of the freaking campaign offices, right? We would eat at the fundraisers. These kids don't know this today. They don't understand, right? That we learned from, like, what I'm saying is you didn't learn in school. You learned like me. You learned on, right? How did you learn politics?
I learned the School of Hard Knocks, and basically, the training I had on the police department, the people I had to deal with the police department, made me a better person, made me a better businessman, because I was able to see, the kind of the bullshitters coming from a mile away, and of course in politics, they'll try to sell politicians anything, and so I had all kinds of people they're trying to build the bridge to nowhere, try to hire me to get something done for them that didn't make any sense, and I wouldn't take them as a client, but that was the training that I think I learned from the police department that helped me in business, which was great.
Because you don't want to promise something that you can't deliver.
Well, no, I don't want to get caught up in something that's nothing.
Right, exactly.
Okay,
right.
And, so that's and I had for my own benefit and create my own, let's say, name and brand, I had to have credibility. Credibility was the most important thing to me. And so, and being honest and credible, those are the two most important things that led me to land a lot of clients. And people saw that.
Look, I've known you a long time. I was younger, but I looked up to you guys. I spent a lot of time in your office, a lot of time in those days. Brian, fighting with Brian, whatever. Trying to, you tough Rodney, taking jabs at me. But it was all fun. That was Miami. But I also watched, and I think it all, your mentors. I mean, your parents, obviously, you had good values growing up, but what did Steve, if you could say, like, some of that you're talking about, Steve taught you, I'm sure, and Monty, like, what did they teach you? Like, what did you learn from them that helped you, be successful this way?
Well, I just said that, your word is your honor.
Yeah.
And so if you give someone your word, keep your word, be honest. I think what happens in this people's game, or this people business that we're in, is that it's your credibility. So if you're telling someone you're going to raise them X amount of dollars, what I did is I never commit to a number, and I just over-delivered.
Right.
And so I built credibility that way. And so I think it's important, though, and also, again, back to, there's a lot of people out here putting a spin on something. And what you don't want to do is get caught up as like you're just the next guy who's another bullshitter, basically. And I didn't go down that path.
And Rodney, you know as well as I do, and people seem to forget this, this is a relationship town, and it still is.
Totally. Yeah.
I mean, I'm fortunate, and you're fortunate that people will take calls, even if you didn't have any power, because that's this town. If there's respect, and you've been here and you earned it, it's still that kind of town. And I think a lot of people, that's Miami. They come in, they try to take advantage of it, and eventually Miami spits them out. But they didn't do that to you, and of course. And let's move on to, I mean, you got, you're this working class kid, right, growing up, and then you're at the precipice of power. I mean, let's call it what it is, right? I hate that word,
I was a lot more than a lobbyist. What I did is I built a big parking lot system downtown Miami. I had the largest surface parking lot business. I ended up selling that. I built an electronic medical records company. I was selling other people's software. I was hosting it here at the NAP. Someone came knocking on my door, wanted all my accounts. Did very, very well with that. I then, as I started lobbying and the developers started hiring me, I kind of learned that business. And then I went out and started buying my own property and getting the entitlements and flipping it to developers. So I learned that game. So, it's just another, I kind of took advantage of learning what I learned and then kind of using it to my advantage. And so, I've been blessed in business, and I'm still out there doing all kinds of different things.
And that's what I want to get to next. And by the way, of course, I mean, that's like, if you have a creative mind, you have to have a creative mind, because a lot of lobbyists they call themselves lobbyists. You got involved with businesses, you learned. And that's where you've been a bit different. But that's what I was saying was, let's move on to, I mean, you've done a lot in this community. I mean, you chaired the Miami Super Bowl host committee, right? Yep. 3 years in a row, and I think you're going to be chairing it again.
Well, Dick Anderson brought me on the Super Bowl committee.
Yeah.
The all-pro safety for the Miami Dolphins. I've been on that committee 36 years. And Dick was the first chairman of a Super Bowl committee in America. and he called me up and says, "Hey, I need some help. Could you handle all the political stuff? The state of Florida, Miami-Dade County, the city of Miami." And I said, "Yeah, I'll do it." And I've been on the committee ever since. I'm the only person in America that's chaired 3 Super Bowls and raised over $100 million for Super Bowl. So yeah, I'm proud of that distinction. And then now I'm chairing the FIFA World Cup games.
Yeah, let's talk about that. So this is a big deal.
Yeah, so we have 7 games in July of 26 when the town is pretty much dead. Everybody's out of Miami. It's hot. So it's going to fill a huge void. It would be equivalent to having 7 Super Bowls in a 5-week period. So it's amazing. We're in the process of raising in excess of $100 million for police, for executing the transportation plan, all the things that we have to fulfill this agreement with. And we're well on our way, and it's a lot of work, but it's going to be very rewarding for Miami. Miami, I often tell people, Miami's not the hottest city in America, it's the hottest city in the world. Everybody wants to be here.
Yep.
And when you have these big major events like Super Bowl, you have F1 we just had, the Miami Open tennis, you have these the College World Championship, then you put a FIFA World Cup on top of that, that's the cherry on top of the pie. I mean, every country, every city in America would want to host a World Cup game, correct? I mean, think about it.
Of course. I mean, I think this is bigger than football. I mean, this is Miami. First of all, this is soccer. I mean, football, whatever you want to call it. But I'm saying this is, I mean, for how long did we...
And, if you look at the United States, I mean, President Trump is made himself chairman of the federal host committee.
Right.
And then he just appointed Andrew Giuliani as his executive director to kind of coordinate. Remember, there's 11 cities in America that are going to be hosting World Cup games. So there's going to be a big federal effort behind this. And of course, you don't want, what this thing happens is just like Super Bowl goes to what they call a Tier 1 event. Tier 1 is a federal designation that allows all the federal assets to come to you. That's the military, all the cyber stuff that goes on, because what happens on these big events, the world knows that if you're a bad guy, if I want to make a statement, you want to try to make a statement at a major sporting event.
That's true. I mean, look, from that's
a lot of people, by the way, a lot of people don't know this. In 2020, we were attacked. Miami-Dade County's computers were attacked by hackers.
Yep.
And long story short, I won't get into all the details, but the feds were involved, and the feds watched what they were doing, and shut them down at the right time. But that could have been something,
it's
devastating to us, right?
So I don't. This the last 7 or 8 years I kind of been working. I transitioned some I fell into when I was living overseas in Israel, cybersecurity.
Right.
And so I also in my life have been involved with a lot of foreign policy stuff and national security stuff. So this is a topic that's near and dear to my heart. And people don't realize, and I'm glad you brought this up, Miami traditionally has never been a target for this kind of stuff. I always laugh. I'm saying, nobody wants to blow up Miami. They're terrible thing. But all joking aside, that's going to change. And this can be a very dangerous situation. It can be an opportunity for a foreign adversary to try to hack into power structures and all of that. So what is the safety plan? How are they going to handle all of this?
Oh, it's been in the works for a while.
Right.
It just doesn't happen overnight, and there's big security teams and federal, local, state government all working together. So this will be a big rollout for that.
Okay, so let's move forward a bit let's talk about the Florida Wildlife Commission for a minute, because that's near. I mean, look, you have been appointed by 3 governors. Chris, you had a very close relationship for a very long time. I think right early on, you have a close relationship with them all, but then Bush and DeSantis. But that's a pretty important position. Yeah,
it's the governor's number 1 appointment, and I've been able to Governor Bush gave me the first opportunity. And I really enjoyed, it's a volunteer. You don't get paid.
Right.
And it's 7 business people appointed by the governor to oversee the agency, their budget, their policy. And it's been it's very fulfilling. I love the outdoors. I love boating. I love fishing. It's common sense. Of course, a lot of decisions we make are based on science.
Right.
It's not
there's such a thing.
We're not just putting our finger in the air and saying, hey, let's take 10 fish instead of 5. So it's all science-based. And it's somewhat, some of our items are very controversial. So, but that comes with the territory.
There's a lot of power. I mean, people don't realize how much power that is.
Well, we have our own rule-making authority. So we actually, pass legislation, we pass laws, we change laws, and it has nothing to do with the legislature and all that. Although the legislature, the House and Senate approve our budget, so they can hold that over us. But we work with that. We work with the governor. Obviously, we're a governor's agency, but we work with the House and Senate on important issues for Florida. And
and there's also federal. I mean, there's also.
Well, there is a federal fish and wildlife. We work. Obviously, we work with them as well. And so, but it's protecting the resources, the federal, the state resources, fish and wildlife, and the beautiful parks and wildlife management areas we have in the state. So.
But I will ask one question because, look, Rodney, I know you, and you are a conservationist, not in the traditional sense, but in many ways, right?
Yeah.
You're a whole Florida guy. You grew up in a time when, there were lakes and parks, and it's always been a bit of an issue. We're trying to bring some green back, but you also are a smart development guy. But how does that balance? I mean, look at Miami's sometimes, throwing up stuff so fast. How do you balance that? Because it's complicated.
Well, we don't vote on the development stuff.
No, I know that.
So that's kind of goes to the cities and counties, and we would vote. We only kind of manage boat docks. If there's in a manatee area, is where we'll weigh in. But we don't vote on the development. But the state of Florida has done a phenomenal job. A lot of people don't give Governor Bush enough credit, but Governor Bush bought over 1,500,000 acres. He bought it for the public, held in public trust. Governor DeSantis is doing a phenomenal job with respect to all the money he's put into restoration of the Everglades and buying public land. He's a Republican that truly is a conservationist. Now, a lot of that wasn't a platform for Republicans.
No,
but it was a platform for DeSantis from day one, and he proved it. Right when he asked all the board members from the South Florida Water Management to resign, he appointed all new members there. He put the Everglades as a priority. He called when him and I spoke. What can we do to eradicate pythons? I gave him a plan. He's funded it. He's implemented it. He's all in. And it's great to see that, and he's not done. I was with him this past Friday, and we talked about further things he wants to do with the Everglades, which is really great.
And look, it's an important, and I think, it's funny you said that Republicans, but you mentioned Jeb. Jeb does not get enough credit.
Yeah.
And we, looking back, and I could tell a lot of Jeb stories. So can you, without getting into that, Jeb has been a very important part of this community and the state, the country, but specifically in Miami. Jeb and back then they called him so right wing, and you look back and you realize, he supported. I mean, he's a Miami guy, a real Miami guy who supported. Married, to Latina. Very supportive of immigrant groups, very supportive of programs that benefited. It was just within.
I would say he's the godfather of school choice.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. Look, when we ran pre-K, he supported it. He didn't remember. I mean, we were a bit like, oh, what's Jeb going to do? Yeah. And he did. And so I think that I miss guys like Jeb, man.
Yeah, Jeb was a very, very good policy guy.
Well, he's a policy, like Bob Graham.
Yeah,
right.
Very thoughtful, very, he's very smart. It's a shame he didn't become president. He would have made a great president.
It was just the times different, right? I was going to support him at the time. I did, but look, he definitely was a policy wonk, though, and unfortunately, Bob Graham was another one. I don't know. You didn't know. You were not. You knew Bob. Yeah, he was another one. Yeah, but that was so. What I'm just trying to. Let's talk about. I have a question for you.
Go.
So I said this to you earlier, and I think you might have missed my point. What I was saying was that you grew up a working class kid, 11 kids, old Miami, right? Like, you didn't have silver spoons. It was different times. Miami is not a place where it has a long history and all that. You just have to carve your own, at least back then. But what do you think now? And I say this, you're a guy who just grew up a regular guy. Whatever, fishing, eating smoked fish dip, trying to pick up girls. I didn't tell anybody, married a Miami Dolphin cheerleader, Sheila, you're just a Miami kid, man.
Yeah.
And then you get to like precipice of power. I mean, power, call what you want, but you have the opportunity to do good. You know everybody. I mean, I know. I mean, presidents, governors. They take your calls. They respect you. What do you like? Look back for a moment. Like, take a minute. Like, what do you like? What do you think? Like, how does that impact you? Do you ever think about that?
Yeah, listen, it's been a great ride. The ride's still going. I enjoy it. I enjoy working hard.
I hope it is still going. God forbid.
Yeah, and I actually enjoy watching the community shine. When we bring Super Bowls and these FIFA games to town, I mean, I have friends that own hotels and restaurants and shopping centers. They all do very, very well. And that's what it's all about. Everybody, all ships rise as the water rises, correct? And so, it's fulfilling that, to watch Miami grow, and being a small part, very small part of it. But I think it's just, it's fun. And the good thing about life is you got to have fun doing what you do. And that takes a lot of stress off the long hours, and so there's got to be a lot of laughs along the way.
What was the last fun thing you did, man?
Oh, this last fun thing I did, I had my kids and my grandkids out in the boat at Elliott Key.
Oh, nice.
For Mother's Day. Yeah,
that's always.
So we had a blast.
Yeah,
just enjoyed the beautiful, looking at all the buildings from the water perspective, and just enjoying Biscayne Bay, which is just something special.
You've always had that ability. I mean, you're an intense guy, shocker.
Yeah.
But you've always had that ability to relax. I
always tell the people around me, families first. Always remember families first. So if your child is having a birthday or they're participating in a play or a soccer game or something, go to that game. I remember when my dad went to every one of my high school football games, and when he was at the hospital and when he wasn't particularly going to come home, I remember telling him, Dad, I love you I never told you this before, but thanks for going to all of my high school football games. I remember you being there and being supportive, and I know you're a busy guy in the community. So I think these children know when you participate. Right.
I think it's one of the most.
And I now, as I go to see my grandchildren participate,
yeah.
I watch the parents who are there, but I can watch some of the kids who parents or no one's there for them, and I watch that and I say, oh my God, if only but you never know. Parents probably working 2 jobs to keep make ends meet. They don't have the flexibility, so I don't put it on parents, but the kids know. You understand? It's
hey, listen, I think that. I don't want to get into this, which is another conversation. No, I mean, I think that, look, family values, I think we're losing them.
Back to your point, but I've always I even tell everybody in my office, from our assistants and the bookkeeper and everybody else in the office, and I tell the associates, listen, if you have a family issue, deal with that first. Family first. You know what I mean? We can deal with everything. This is why there's a group of us. We can plug and play. And I think that's important, because when I was building a business, I was out long hours, many weekends and all that. And I know, and I have my wife Sheila's been great. She's plugged the hole as far as making sure that the kids are taken care of and all that. And so I had a great partner in the.
And you still right? No, you've been married now. I interrupted you. You said you had a great partner. No, I interrupted you.
Just saying. She's a great partner. She's been a great wife, great mother, great grandmother.
You're one of the few who didn't get divorced, man. I said you still, but seriously, you've had a lot. You have had a great marriage, man.
It's not. I mean, a lot of my friends in business, but they're all divorced.
Yeah, I know.
Not all of them, but a lot of them.
I've always admired that about you, man.
I'm lucky there too.
So let's segue for a minute. We have. I'm always looking at the clock. How much time we have left? We have a good 6 minutes. So I want to hit a couple more key points. I want to segue. You talked about family. You guys went through a tough time. I remember. I was working for Alex. About 2001, maybe. Your nephew.
Oh yeah.
You were very close to Corey, right? I mean, he was helping build a water line, I think, for his friend, and he got killed.
Oh well,
on Chrome.
On Chrome Avenue, they were a drunk driver hit and killed 2 boys, young boys, and my nephew being one of them. Yeah. wasn't a good day in the Barreto family because, you know, when you're a big family, or even when you're a small family, you know, it's usually your grandparents leave, and it's just kind of a natural change in life. But when you have to, when the parents of an 18-year-old have to bury him or put him to rest, that's not a healthy situation.
That was really had a big impact on you as godfather. I mean, emotionally, I remember.
Yeah, I was his godfather. I went out to the scene. I identified him, and then I called my brother and told my brother that I'd come over to pick him up. I told him that Corey was on his way to the hospital. I couldn't tell him on the phone, so I you know, when I got to his house, I told him that Corey didn't make it. But it wasn't a good time for them. We still celebrate Corey's life. We just last weekend. They just had a Christopher Columbus. He went to Christopher Columbus. They have a Corey Barreto fishing tournament. That's
of course
been going on now, you know, for 17 years. So it's you know, he's always with us in spirit, and you know, thank you for mentioning that. But yeah, that was a dark time with the Barreto family.
And I know, and look, you know, first of all, I'll add a couple things here, and then before I move on, because I saw you as a different person back then. I knew you, you know, the brash, all of us were, not just you. And I remember that. That was a big transitional moment for you and your family. First of all, your brother, Richard, I mean, he was Miami chief of police, which was not an easy job. That was obviously devastating. He stepped down, right?
I think it took a lot of wind out of his sails. Yeah. And it was hard for my parents to watch my brother and my sister-in-law go through what they went through.
But it changed your dynamic of who you kind of fit in your family, right? In a sense of like you became sort of you're kind of the one who guides the family in many ways, right?
Well, I mean, I think we all had a role to play, and I helped. You know, with my background, I was able to help with Richard navigate some of the political, the judicial, the police, the investigation. You know, none of that's easy. And it still can't be easy on them. You never forget.
No, but I meant you became the emotional center in many ways of your family is what I'm saying. One of the youngest.
Yeah.
I mean, you are. I mean, they rely on you. I mean, you all have a role to play. Yeah. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying, but you are, you know, you've been a very centered force for your family. You were there for your mother all the time. Yep. You're always with her.
Yep.
It's a compliment, Rodney.
Yeah, I got it. But I think you know, as a family, all my brothers and sisters, we all came together.
Yeah.
And we often give each other support. We're on a daily chat, and that we're always supporting each other. And if we have to help out in other ways, we do, which is great. So we're blessed that there's no black sheep in the family.
Right.
And you know, and we're all still alive, all 11 kids. Knock on wood.
Right. Exactly.
And you know, and so you know, from that perspective, it's great. You know, the family's obviously gotten bigger as you bring on, you know, the sisters-in-laws and brother-in-laws and all that. It gets bigger and bigger, and so.
So let me ask two more questions before we close. I was just thinking about this while I'm sitting here. So you grew up Miami kid, right? Working class, old school Miami story. You've also been part of turning this town into what it is today. And it's complicated. I think you probably already know what I'm about to ask. You know, Alex and I were talking about this, about in many ways we're a victim of our own success. So you're the guy, right? You grew up in, you know, working class family. You benefited from a small town, this and that, but a lot of people, middle class, working class, we're a victim of our own success, I'm saying, are pushed out. They can't afford to live here anymore, you know? And it's unfortunate, but how, is there a solution to that? I mean, how does that make you feel as somebody who grew up right in those circumstances? Because it's tough now.
It is tough. We become, cost of living in Miami, it's gotten up there. Yeah, so it's, you know, I think those are the pains of being very successful.
It's a victim of our own success, and it's. I'm not saying I wasn't throwing at you like you have a solution right now. Yes, we all had a solution. It's economics, and it's just unfortunate. I'm saying that, you know, it is unfortunate, and so I guess with success also comes challenges. And I just hope that we can.
Yeah, it's a challenge, but it's not a challenge only for our community.
It's for every community.
It's everywhere. You know, affordable housing, you know, education. school choice, all that is.
Listen, this has been going on.
Yeah.
Miami's had disparity for that. I mean, this is not but it's more of a problem for our community because we've been so successful. You're a part. I mean, this community has been phenomenally successful. So the last thing, and there's so much. I hate when this happens because look at the time. I'm like, there's so much I want to talk about, but we'll do it again. But what do you want people to say about you 100 years from now, 50 years from now? Seriously, what if the legacy, professionally first, what you've left this community? Like, what is most important?
I don't know. I just that he was a good guy. That's all. I'm not.
Yeah, exactly. Right?
I'm not looking for no special treatment. I'm just enjoying the ride. Hopefully I'll leave from the perspective of the environment that I'm going to leave it in better shape than when we found it. For my grandkids and so on and so forth. So those are some of the things that I think of. But no, I think
just a simple guy, man. Good guy and a little red Corvette.
There's going to be community leaders behind me and in front of me and back of me and around me, and they'll do really well. And I just wish that everybody takes pride in your community, takes pride in your hometown, and learn to give back. That's all. Just learn to give back.
And 30 seconds. Legacy you want to leave, the most important legacy. It's not professionally for your family.
Oh, I just, I want my grandkids to have a great education. I want them to be able to stay in this community and enjoy it. But as they enjoy it, I want them to give back. I want them to help lift other people up. As a big family, by the way, we quit giving all the grandkids, we couldn't give them Christmas gifts. We pool all the money, and we would take the money, and we'd go down to South Dade to a migrant family, and we would bring the grandkids with us and show them to give gifts to others that didn't have much.
I will say one last thing. I think you and I have always been very like-minded in the sense of this is a different kind of community, right? And there's so many people who never would have had opportunities.
Right.
And everybody here, we all did. You, me, I'm saying everybody. I remember that my friend Nelson just wrote a book. You remember Nelson in Gapier?
Yeah.
And he put me in the book. I was like, oh, look at that.
Yeah.
But I'm not bragging. What I'm saying is because he was opening doors late night at a hotel. And I brought him to the mayor. And that's what I think a legacy that you also.
I think the last thing I'd leave you with is that I would tell people who listen to this podcast that, it's not.
Or watch it, man. Remember.
Or watch it. It's not what you know, it's who you know. And when you see an opportunity, take advantage of it.
Yep, 100%.
Yeah.
And don't burn bridges.
Don't burn bridges.
Right?
Don't burn bridges.
And respect everybody equally.
Don't
right?
burn bridges.
No, exactly. Not in this town, right?
No.
Unless you want to go swim with the fishes, right?
It's funny,
exactly.
man. I've seen secretaries down at Miami-Dade, and then I come back 3 months later, and they're a division chief. So you better don't burn bridges.
I mean, listen, there's nothing more important than being loyal and all of that. But listen, I'm so happy you did this, man. You didn't chase the spotlight, right? But somehow always ended up in the room. That's not luck, man. That's Miami.
Yeah.
I mean, it's hard work. And look, this is a place, it always has been, where power moves and whispers, right? Loyalty is currency. Yeah. And the people who actually shape the city aren't always like the names on the buildings.
No.
So for decades, you've been a part of that, not just on your own, but as a part of a family, which I think that's really the story that helped build this place from the inside. And paid, like Richard, paid for it in many ways. It had a toll. And from the Florida East Coast railroads. I mean, I love these stories. City Hall, I joke around back doors, although I went through this back.
We didn't mention that, but my dad sold all the property that Metro Rail runs on to the county. That's Florida East Coast Railroad property.
So from the property for that far, Chrome Avenue to the FIFA stage, I mean, your family has been in it. They've been quiet. They've been consistently in it. Yeah. You're not perfect, man. No. I'm not. None of us are, but I'm joking around. But you're still here, man.
Yeah, it's funny. I got the county to rename a portion of Metro after the bus lane after my dad.
I knew that. You should have brought the proclamation, man.
It's funny, but I don't think he would have liked it.
No, he wouldn't have.
No, but we did it, and I smiled every time. I was just by there the other day. I looked up and I saw his name. And I smiled. So.
I wish I could ask one more question, but I see them looking over at me. I'm going to get in trouble. But
we're done.
But I want to finish because this is important. I want to leave with this. I mean, look, through every version of Miami, you've been here through the chaos, the difficult times, reinvention, the rise. And you didn't just survive, Rodney. You've left a mark, man. You know, you've made mistakes like all of us. You've done amazing things. You've left a mark here. And the truth is, you know, and I say this, and it's look, it's the reality, man. Half the moves in the city wouldn't have happened without him, and people know that. And you know, some people won't say it, you know, but and that's the truth. And so, I love you a lot, man. I'm glad you're here. I'm proud of you. You look fucking good, man.
Thanks.
And you know, look, thanks for sitting down, man. Thanks for being part of this story, brother.
Thanks for having me.
Come on, man. I love
We'll have to
man.
do it again.
Oh, we're definitely doing it again.
All right.
I think Brian, you know, Brian's next, man.
All right.
Brother, man.